And welcome to this signing day special of the Spartan Spotlight. I'm here joined by my guest, my colleague at 24/7 Sports, Corey Robinson. We're going to break down all of the happenings today for Michigan State. Probably the most exciting signing day we've covered in terms of the day of. So we'll get into it right after this. Well, it's been a fun day here covering recruiting for Michigan State football. It's been a lively week or so here as there were a lot of storylines for us to follow, a lot of moving parts in a lot of different directions, some good, some bad, some that were bad and became good. And Corey, I'd say at least in the 4 or 5 signing days, I think it's now 4 signing days that you and I have covered together since I got in the industry. Is it fair to say that this is the most lively day of in probably that span?
Yeah, I think this is probably the biggest one. The last big one is probably, was it 2020 with Keon Coleman when
2021.
2021 when I had that one and Rayshawn or whatever. But yeah, I think this is the biggest one just because you had Jace, you had the intrigue with Ayden West in Ohio State, and then nobody outside of the industry and football room really knew about Leonard Ah You coming and becoming a commitment. So it made it a little bit more exciting. Just because you added some stuff where like we kind of had an idea about some of the stuff ahead of time, but to be able to share some surprises with the fans kind of made it a little bit more exciting to kind of interact and see their excitement on the board just because it has been cookie cutter.
For sure. And we'll go through each of those moves and kind of like when we found out, the way that they were trending, and kind of how we got here today, because each of them were a little different for sure. Before we do that, I guess I just want to turn the floor back to you to talk about, because you were at the presser that Jonathan Smith just did for signing day. It probably, I think, just ended about an hour or so ago. So any notable kind of quotes, anything that he talked about that kind of stuck out to you when you were there?
Big thing that he really made a point to talk about was the Spartan Nation NIL program that kind of partners through. He gave them a ton of credit and thanks for making some stuff happen, because a lot of that stuff that got exciting towards the end, and even the stuff that didn't get exciting towards the end, was thanks to the NIL group, the collective Spartan Nation, stepping up and saying, "Hey, what do we need to do to make these happen? We got to get them here. We don't want to lose these guys, or we want to get this guy back." So he was really thankful for the support they had. Talked about they had a strong relationship where they can kind of bounce ideas off their head. And stuff isn't set in stone necessarily. Like there's wiggle room with as far as the support they can get. And even beyond just the signing day, he talked about it for roster retention too, being important, and then heading into the portal. So he definitely sounded really happy with where the direction is going. I know you and I, in this thing, we know kind of a little bit of what's going on. So it's not just kind of a soundbite at a signing day. Like they did, they did step up down the stretch. And I think, I don't think they were nearly as bad as some people made them out to be prior to today in the NIL landscape of things. But they did improve, I think, over the last week or two, where you're starting to see a little bit of unitedness.
Right. And I think like a lot of the stuff that's conflated, and we won't go into NIL too much, probably wrap this topic up in the next minute or two, but kind of like the biggest 2 misnomers or misconceptions are the fact that the other schools are just loaded because Ohio State went out and got a $15 million roster and Oregon does what they do and Ole Miss went out and kind of put all their chips in one basket this year. Beyond a few of those like kind of outliers, and Michigan getting over 10 million for one player from one donor, while the rest of their collective still isn't really functioning at a different level than they have been in past years. Like those things are anomalies. Those are not the norm. And I get like Michigan State's class, like the whole time wasn't ranked in a place where you're like, oh, we must be rich at Michigan State if you're a fan. It's like a lot of that goes into it. A lot of the things partially are the fact that the school's had 2 good years in the last like 9 years or so. That doesn't mean you should be losing some of the guys to Illinois, like a Grant Bierman or something like that, just because you're not winning 10 games. But there's nuance involved with a lot of these discussions, and it's not the Michigan State sitting here poor and things of that nature. And but going into the specifics, some of the guys that they were able to land, and we'll start with Jace Clarizio. He was the hometown kid. He was the near 4-star, even though same way with Ayden West, both 89 rated 3 stars on 24/7. With him, he flipped to Alabama on November 26th, and today on December 4th, he is a Michigan State Spartan as he's got the paperwork in. Corey, this was one, unlike the Ayden West, unlike the Leonard Ah You, where we've known about it for a few days. This is one where even for us, it was kind of this early morning kind of a development behind the scenes. We knew pretty much for the most part that West was going to sign with Michigan State today. We knew that Ah You was coming for about 4, 5, 6 days. I'll let you speak to those when we talk about them. But Clarizio, pretty much as much of a surprise, and I'll share what I heard about kind of Smith going at it last night, but kind of what made this happen for Michigan State as far as you're concerned, and kind of how this came together.
Yeah, I think Jonathan Smith talked about it at the press conference. They said they didn't give up for one. They felt like they had a lot to sell, the relationships, because Clarizio has been to campus probably 50 times since, Jonathan Smith's been here. It's an easy trip, which makes it convenient. But when you get somewhere that many times, you build really good relationships with the entire staff. I think that was something that held him off from jumping at the Alabama offer right away, where he got offered early November, took the official mid-November, took like 10 days or so before he made a decision. I think those relationships played a bigger factor than it being close, which is that part's nice. Like, you can't ignore that part, but I think the relationships that he built here were a much larger factor than anything. And then too, I mean, you start talking as a family, he's an early enrollee, so he was heading somewhere soon. So
Yeah.
so it's not like, oh, I'm going to Alabama in May, I don't have to think about it. Like, you're leaving. And so that's a lot for a parent and a kid, kind of step out, because there's value staying close, because
Yeah.
if you want some home cooked food, or you can kind of take on a leadership role with your teammates that don't live so close. You can bring them to your house to hang out with your parents, to go get a home cooked meal. Stuff like that matters, and I think ultimately that was a big play in it.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. And at the end of the day, like if you're a running back, you have to consider depth chart more than a lot of positions, more so than maybe O-line or defensive back or linebacker, where multiple are playing at a time. Sure, like you rotate a lot at running back, but you still mostly have to be in that top 2 kind of thing. And teams like Alabama, they're always going to take a guy in the portal pretty much most years. Then they're going to have like 2 or 3 high 4 stars, maybe a 5-star mixed in here and there. And if Alabama's main sales pitch to a kid is like, oh, trust us, like you come here, you'll play as a freshman, and the other sales pitch is, here's our logo, we're Alabama, that is not going to be, at first it might be like jarringly interesting to a kid, but it's not a sustainable sort of a last minute kind of recruiting pitch, whereas the other school, Michigan State, has long relationships in the hometown sort of feel. That's definitely critical, and that's going to help and win out in most cases. But yeah, like he's a kid that now you get to pair with Zion Gist, who I've been a fan of ever since he kind of came on the radar. The biggest thing with him is the feet. Jace Clarizio is more of a balanced running back, and I think he has some breakaway speed that maybe Gist doesn't have, but I think Gist has the other qualities that maybe Clarizio doesn't have. The in between the narrow trenches, kind of making himself skinny and just bouncing it like K'Ron Lynch-Adams. So I'm not going to say he's going to be as good, but that's kind of the feat that I see out of Gist. So Now you're in a spot where I thought Just was good to begin with. I didn't want to kind of pound the table too much because I know it comes off perception-wise of, oh, he's just hyping up the MAC commit that Michigan State just got, even though we just lost Jace Clarizio to Alabama. But now I can kind of freely say, like, I think Just is very underrated. And then you bring in the near 4-star in Clarizio. Now you have a really respectable duo here in the running back room. And Clarizio is a guy who you said, Corey, I don't know if he had the greatest offensive line, but he had some production. And this is a kid that now you feel good about having for the next few years. I don't know necessarily to what extent they'll be running him out there as a freshman. I'm sure that you saw that with Mekhi Frazier and some of these guys that they were running out there this year, that he probably will get some run, especially if he deserves it, especially if he can play in special teams. But at the end of the day, you have a base for your future, and Brandon Tulis and Frazier and Clarizio and just these young guys give you a solid 4 right there. And then you go and see if Nate Carter comes back, and if you want to add somebody from the portal, and the running back room is in a good spot. But Ayden West, the other big kind of, I would say, a big recruiting win for sure. And I would say more so than that, it's a legitimate one, because a lot of these situations where you say, oh, this school beat this kid, or this school beat this school for a kid, it's maybe something sort of along the lines of, oh, like, sure, Ohio State might have wanted him, but like they haven't recruited him since June. Or, okay, they offered him, but they didn't recruit him hard. Or they wanted him, but they also wanted this other guy, and they got this other guy. In this case, in every way, shape, or form, Ayden West was somebody that Ohio State wanted until the very last second. They probably wanted him even more at the last second than they did maybe the day before, even though he's always a take, just because they lost their other like star cornerback commit to Oregon. So this is something that for the entire length of the last few weeks, Ohio State has wanted him tremendously for the whole amount of time. And he signs with Michigan State today, all despite Demetrius Martin leaving to go to UCLA. And I think that I don't, it's hard to quantify like how improbable this seems on a surface level in a vacuum analysis of a quarterback's coach leaving. Ohio State wants him bad. And he's not from Michigan. He's from Virginia. So he doesn't really have, or sorry, Maryland. And he's kind of like, he almost flipped to Virginia Tech on his official visit there in early November. And yet Michigan State keeps him despite all of that. What about this Ayden West win, Corey? Thoughts?
Yeah, that's you nailed a lot of it. It was a straight up just a win because, yes, he had. I mean, I get he has the relationship with some of the other coaches, like Joe Rossi, the defense coordinator, gets a lot of credit. Jonathan Smith, again, he played a major factor, but you lost the position coach that was your primary recruiter, so it's, you don't have that part of it. Like you mentioned, he's in Maryland, so that you don't got anything as far as like location advantages. He took an official visit to Michigan State in the summer and one unofficial visit to the Rutgers game, and he took an official visit to Ohio State. So he hasn't been on the campus like Jace was, where 50 times. So that was just a straight up win against the team that wanted him. They kept trying to go after him this morning, but the letter was already in, and he was set on where he wanted to go, because the job that they showed him and the path of playing time maybe, and then relationships, and like they're honest with him, and that's what kids want at the end of the day. The smart ones can understand that everyone's going to say, oh, you're going to play this and that, but if you have good guidance, and I know some of the people that guided him, he had that, where they're like, hey, it is probably 2 years of watching at Ohio State, which is fine, but in 2 years, did they recruit over you with someone else?
Right.
You go to Michigan State, you work hard, and maybe you see the field, and you can put tape out there, because that's the biggest thing right now is you got to play. And Jonathan Smith mentioned him when he was kind of cornered in his press conference to name a couple guys that stuck out that might be early contributors. Ayden West was one of the names that he mentioned, and said that he definitely has a chance to come in here and see the field as a freshman.
Yeah, for sure. And the thing with a guy like Ayden West, and then you start factoring in the other corners and DBs as part of this class, the safeties and the nickel and some of the other commits, you have basically kept the whole DB room intact in terms of this recruiting class, despite Martin leaving, because you bring in George Mullins from Florida. and you bring in Terrence Edwards from Virginia, the cousin of Felton Davis, and LaRue Zamorano left, but you've replaced him with, I guess numbers wise, he's more of a safety, but you replace him with Evan Young down in Texas. And now, as we're talking about here, Ayden West stays in the class. So you went from 5 DB commits to 5 DB commits. You've had basically a straight swap here. And this is all despite Demetrius Martin leaving. And this is pretty much as great of a outcome as you could have hoped in a vacuum after that move. Because as you and I know, like when these position coaches leave, like things can immediately unravel quickly.
Yeah.
I was already thinking like, oh, like they might lose George Mullins to maybe like, even if it's not as good of a program, maybe somebody like a UCF down south, even though their head coach left, or like what about some of these guys that like Evan Young, what if he goes to like a UTSA or something? Like just because these guys weren't like with Ohio State offers like Ayden West, these guys can still kind of quickly start to look elsewhere just for comfortability reasons. And that didn't happen. So the entire DB class being kept, and then you swapping Zamorano numbers wise with Evan Young, and then you have a nickel in Terrence Edwards, and then you have George Mullins and Ayden West. Like you've quickly put together a formidable foundation here. And as we've been saying on the board, as everyone probably figures, the DB room is going to be active in the portal. That's going to be one of the 3 biggest positions, I would say, behind offensive line, defensive end, and corner. And you're probably looking at maybe a linebacker or 2, maybe a running back, wide receiver for sure. Sorry, wide receiver should be close to the very top of that list, I should say. So yeah, this is a great foundation in terms of what it does for that room, despite all odds. I would say right when Martin left. Leonard Ah You, Corey, this is the one that I know you've had the draft for almost a week or so. I won't monologue on this one first. I'll just turn it over to you. Tell us about Leonard Ah You and this surprise pickup, at least publicly.
Yeah, so he was part of the 2023 recruiting class for Oregon State. Leggy was his primary recruiter. Obviously, he has the connection, both being from Hawaii. He went on a 2-year mission to Samoa. He's actually there until I believe March or April. He'll get to Michigan State in early May and kind of get it rolling. But 6'4", 210 at the time that he came in. I'm sure he's packed on a couple pounds in 2 years, just because as you grow and mature, your body adds some more mass. Could be an inside linebacker, or he could be that stand-up rush end. They're leaving both of it open, see where it goes. I personally think rush end, because if you look at his tape, he's just a really good downhill attacking linebacker where he can drop in space, but I think he's where his money's at is in the pass rushing ability, which if anybody's seen Michigan State this year, that's something they need to stack on. But yeah, it gets that whole Hawaiian pipeline, the Polynesian pipeline, keeps that active and going, moving in the right direction. And I think this staff too, they like to Michigan State, someone going away for 2 years, and we've seen that where like, oh, what shape is he going to be and how are they going to do this?
Right.
Like being on the West Coast, they are well versed in dealing with people that go on Mormon missions and getting them back into shape. Jonathan Smith at his press conference mentioned, hey, he's going to get here in early May. We'll go through the whole summer, and I don't see any reason why he wouldn't be, in good shape by the time we start fall camp. Like, he's not my age. He's a young kid still, where it doesn't take long to kind of get back in the feel of it. So.
And the biggest thing is, like, if they're not going to be relying on him maybe at the whole season, but at least not in the first half of the season, to be coming in and setting the tone on the edge, maybe he might be somebody that if they have 2 injuries, you're hoping in November can play a little bit. And worst comes to worst, let's say he's not a contributor the first year and he redshirts, you're looking at a 21-year-old redshirt freshman that you'll have until the time he's 25, even better. So at the end of the day,
he's still a 2025, really. So like, just because he's older and he was away for 2 years, he's still got the same clock. So
yeah, it's almost better. Like if you're the college program, the older these kids are, the better. It's maybe the NFL might care if a quarterback is 25 years old or something like that, but if you're the college team and you're the college fan base, the older the better at the end of the day. So this is a great underrated pickup. He was an 88 rated player in the 2023 class. I don't think the system would allow for him to be counted as a 2025 high school kind of class calculator, like ranking sort of impact guy. But at the end of the day, like that's what you're getting is you're getting a 20-year-old that 2 years ago was in 88, and now you get him for his more mature seasons as a football player than not. So those are kind of the three biggest pickups today. All of which we kind of would consider to be three of the maybe 5, 6, 7 best passes, depending on where you rank them, because Derek Simmons is up there, Braylon Collier is up there, Drew Nichols, who rankings wise isn't up there. We like him a lot and think he should be up there, but we'll kind of go through all of these guys that signed today. We'll start with Derek Simmons there out of the guys we haven't talked about. Corey, he's Michigan State. He was their first 4-star to be made in the 24/7 rankings. Charles White obviously followed. We'll talk about him next. But he was the other guy that Michigan State coach Jonathan Smith today mentioned as someone that could play early along with Ayden West. Derek Simmons, we've both been big fans of him for a while. Tell us about him.
He reminds me, and this isn't to say he's going to be him and put that pressure on him, but he reminds me watching his tape of Jarrell Worthy. Worthy came in kind of actually rated lower and thought of less than Derek Simmons, but kind of same thing where just they're so quick off the snap, can get really low, even though, get underneath the guards and kind of use their strength. A track guy, really good thrower. So Jonathan Smith sees him as a guy that, even though he's a freshman and playing right in the middle, he's a guy that has the strength that, and being an early enrollee plays a factor too, that could see the field really quickly here. And Michigan State needs to fill probably, he doesn't have to come in and start at defense tackle, but you need some depth spots there.
Yeah, and there's some similarities with Alex Van Sumer there too, playing in the middle of Michigan, but having that burst that maybe people haven't seen just because of where he's playing, being physically ready. So he's definitely one of the more enticing prospects in the class, and it's good to see that the rankings reflect that. And as we know, Alan True, the Midwest 24/7 director of recruiting, he always does a great job with the evaluations in that regard. So Charles White, the other Michigan State 4-star here at press time, he is one of the many Orchard Lake St. Mary's prospects here in the mix. Jaden Savory, kind of the other one that signed today. And then you have Bryson Williams, who is expected to sign with Michigan State in February. Obviously, we'll track that, and you never know. And then Antonio Johnson, the offensive lineman that is hoping to be eligible and have his credits transfer as he went between high schools. This bunch of 4 could really have the opportunity to be the core here for Michigan State in this class. With Charles White, what do we see about him linebacker-wise? And you can also kind of just talk about Damari Malone here in the same breath and kind of say what their styles are like, what they have in common, whatnot, and things of that nature.
Yeah, I think both of them are athletic linebackers. DJ White, he'll have to add some weight and muscle, obviously, to be ready to play Big Ten football, but getting the 4-star ranking speaks to how well he moves. He's got really good speed, long arms. So once he gets that there on him, I think he's a guy that you can look at where you can drop him back in pass coverage. He's done a good job of that on film. And then once he gets that weight to stand up against the run and take on offensive linemen, I think he could be a good impact player for you. Again, another really good track kid. Does really good with the hurdles. State qualifier, champion type of kid, somewhere in that range. Damari Malone, same thing. He's a really quick linebacker. He's actually bigger. I know you've seen him live a couple times. He's a lot bigger than I expected when I first saw him in the summer. So he's starting to already put on some of that muscle mass. Good two-way player for them. He played offense and made a lot of plays. He wasn't just on there. Like he was scoring touchdowns, and when they really needed something, he seemed to be a guy that they would go to on offense, getting him the ball. But as a linebacker, I think while he's not rated higher, I think he's more he's probably going to see the field faster because he's more college ready body wise. And
especially on special
both
teams.
are good ones. And they were both top guys for Rossi. We mentioned Grant Bierman, who went to Illinois, but those two and Bierman were kind of the 3 guys he locked into. So to get 2 of them is huge.
Exactly. Yeah. 2 of the top 3 for Rossi, all the way going back to the junior days. So good points there. And then with Malone, I went and saw the Dakota High School combine back in the spring. I'm going to say April. And he looked good. He looked fine. He looked like a high school junior. And then I saw, again, a regular season game this past October, and he definitely bulked up a bit. And yeah, their two most explosive offensive plays were to Damari Malone. So yeah, he has the athleticism, and he's somebody that at least on special teams should be able to play early. I don't know if I would play him as a true freshman if he's only on special teams. You probably want to keep the red shirt, but he's somebody physically that at least could contribute in that regard. And yeah, those two linebackers, you get two of your top three early on. I think you're in good shape there. And Joe Rossi kind of did his job on the recruiting trail. 1 4-star, 1 medium to high 3-star, both from this state. And moving on, Michigan State got Braylon Collier from Sandusky, Ohio. Millennium Force Jaden Reed is kind of the nickname that I say that we start pushing. I guess he has to earn that on the field as well. But he's somebody that you and I, Corey, have kind of tracked his whole senior year and thought that the numbers he was putting up, just the way that he looks, he can play inside, he can play outside. He's a touchdown magnet. He's athletic. He's somebody that offensively, would you say he probably has the best chance of seeing the field on a regular basis before maybe anybody else in this class?
Yeah, I think I agree with that because, I mean, if you look at him, he's such a good route runner, which Jonathan Smith mentioned that. He said he runs routes much better than most high school kids that you're going to bring into a program. So he gets that end of it. He's got the reliable hands. He's playing for state championship this weekend. So there'll be one more game left, hopefully, for him and his teammates. They're able to get the job done. But if you look at his receptions, touchdowns, and yards, they're some of the top numbers in the history of Ohio football, which anyone that follows Ohio State or Ohio football knows that that's one of the better states. So yeah, he's going to come in. I would be almost more surprised if he doesn't play a decent amount than I would be if he redshirted this year, just because I think he's that rare blend of guy that's actually comes in ready, like Nick Marsh did this year, where they're different receivers, but they were both so much further ahead mentally. And that's the part that, you can't really see on tape unless you know what you're looking for. And you could see it with both of these guys' tapes, Marsh and Collier's.
Yeah, I think the ideal scenario is he forces you to play him this freshman season. You don't probably avoid the portal just because you got him, like you kind of do with Marsh, like they kind of did with Marsh last year. But I think if he ends up pushing for that third spot, maybe the fourth spot, and you kind of rotate there, that's ideal. After you kind of go and get the transfers and hopefully keep Nick Marsh here. So those are kind of the dynamics that play in the wide receiver room. And then you go get that speedy slot guy that Michigan State's been lacking for a while that they kind of had at Oregon State. And I think that comes together quickly there. And speaking of the offensive side of the ball, but maybe somebody that might not play right away, Leo Hannon. He's somebody that Michigan State got very early on, all the way from Anaheim, California, Servite High School. He again, like didn't really say a ton. Like you didn't really see him on social media or anything like that. Just quietly Michigan State through and through and never wavered. And Leo Hannon is somebody that, at least from what I saw, he's somebody whose senior tape I actually haven't seen out of like all these guys. But from his junior tape, there wasn't a throw that he couldn't make. He was athletic, but he didn't run just for no reason. Kind of the typical pro style quarterback that Michigan State's targeting these days, that most schools are targeting. Anything to add with Leo Hannon, Corey?
I'll just real quickly, because I know we're kind of running through these. Smith mentioned him as being a film junkie and a whiteboard junkie, where he just breathes the thing. So he mentioned he was excited to have him here just because Smith, being a former quarterback, loves kind of going through the whiteboard with everyone and going through that. So I called him a film junkie and a thrower, passer type guy, where he's got a strong arm, but it's not insane, but he just knows how to get the ball out into the people.
Yeah. And I see a YouTube comment here asking if he was hurt his senior year. Yeah, that is correct. He how many I don't know how many games he played before he got hurt, but he at least played a couple and he looked good in those.
He looked good in those, yeah.
It was a lower body injury, right? I believe. I don't know.
That's what it was reported. So, and then and I spoke to him. He's 100% already. coming in the winter here, so he'll be here in a few weeks.
Mhm.
And all indications are that he's full go in winter conditioning when
Yep.
he arrives. So
Yep, makes sense. So, great pickup there, and a low drama pickup there as far as quarterbacks go, especially quarterbacks that the staff thinks is like a plan A guy early on that you get locked in right away. So, great to see there. Well, Corey, we'll kind of just bunch all the DBs into one because we already talked about West, and then we name dropped a couple of them in that conversation. But Evan Young, safety out of Lufkin, Texas. George Mullins, cornerback out of South Sumter High School down in Florida. Then you're looking at obviously Ayden West from Maryland, who we talked about. And you are looking at Terrence Edwards, who is from Richmond, Virginia. He is the cousin of Felton Davis. Corey, these guys, they all pretty much play different spots. You got West, who's a true corner. You have Edwards, who is a nickel corner, but then they might let him play outside corner depending on how he looks early on. And then you have an Evan Young, who's a safety. George Mullins is another outside corner. So kind of touched on all the spots of the DB room there. Thoughts on kind of that ensemble of guys?
yeah, I just echo what you said earlier. Just for them to hold on to him was pretty amazing. And you flip Zamorano, who followed Martin to UCLA for Young, and they both have the same rating. But you see, like Young kind of came out of nowhere, and he's kind of going upwards. Where Zamorano was a household name very early on, going to a powerhouse high school in California, and then maybe, his recruitment was going in a different direction, but he found a coach that liked him and the other school that liked him. So I thought that was a good class. I thought last year's class was pretty good at defensive back, so that's stacking two of them in a row with good depth.
Yeah, for sure. And then Michigan State also has another defensive tackle in Cal Thrush. We already talked about Derek Simmons and how much we're a fan of him. Thrush, he's listed just generally as a defensive lineman, but with the weight already up to close to 280, I think, or at least 275.
255, I think.
Okay, 255. Listed as 250 on 24/7. He's somebody that they expect to kick inside at the next level for sure. Him, Charles Taplin, those are two guys who, in addition to Zion Gist, who we already talked about, those are kind of the three lowest rated kids in the class. Again, I said Gist is very underrated. Thrush and Taplin probably won't see much of them this year. I would say that's safe to say, right, Corey?
Yeah, I think that's most likely. Or Thrush, he is an early enrollee, and he's going to come in big. But and then he's the one that I'm a little higher on than most people because his dad and grandpa played at Ohio State, so he's got those bloodlines. Jonathan Smith mentioned him as a guy that has just a ton of grit and strength and just knows how to play the game. So I mean, and I'm not saying like I like him and expect him to be Kenny Willekes or something, but I could see him having a very similar career path as like a Maverick Hansen type of guy. So
yeah. Yep. And then Justin Bell, also from Dakota High School, along with Damari Malone, who we talked about. Offensive tackle, might kick inside, but he's big. He's tall. He's 6'8", and it's a healthy weight. I think he was up to, I see 288 here, but I think he was approaching 300 by the end of his senior year. We saw him at several camps. You can't teach size. The technique, the skill needs a little bit of work, but that's kind of why you're able to get a 6'8", 290-pound kid, low drama, got him pretty easily. Coach M is going to kind of get his chance to develop him here. We'll see kind of how he does and where he kind of tracks in terms of which year he's supposed to play. But again, can't teach size. He's somebody that you get in the program, you work on him for 2 years, you kind of go from there. But Drew Nichols, the other offensive lineman here, we touched on him earlier. Again, think he's very underrated. He had a great season out in Murrieta Valley High School down in California. That's exactly the kind of guys that Coach M has had success with over there. Maybe underrated, undervalued. On the West Coast, they don't have the trenches that they prioritize. It's the flag football kind of recruiting. I'm just kidding. I mostly say that in jest, but USC has kind of given them that name out there. But yeah, it's guys like that Coach M has developed throughout the course of his career. He's somebody that all season long, he was very, very solid. He can anchor, he can get out, he can pull. Everything that you want out of an offensive lineman, he did. He has the prototypical size, 6'5". He's listed at 270. I think he was about 280 or so throughout his playing weight as a senior. Anything to add there, Corey, or really anything to add with any of these guys? I think we've pretty much touched on all of them now at this point.
Yeah, I think you got them all covered. I'll say, and then with Nichols, he's young for his grade too. I think he's going to be arriving at 17, maybe not even somewhere like, and just early 17 too, not like almost 18, 17.
Yeah.
So he's pretty young for his age. So for a lineman, that's probably a good thing because he's going to develop even more. And then they talked about too. Losing my train of thought here. Jack Wills, the long snapper out of Hudsonville. They mentioned him in the thing too as signing.
Yeah.
So as we saw this season, when
Caden
Schickel, like we didn't have a game that something wasn't an adventure with kicking. So to get him in here and hopefully, I don't know if Schickel will be back or not. Then that gives you two snappers that you feel comfortable with, which I don't know if there's a program in America that's figured that out more in the last couple of years between Schickel and Hank Pepper a few years prior, where like you lose a guy that can't snap the ball, where like we could talk about today and like that guy doesn't really matter, blah blah. You want to talk about these guys, but when your main guy goes down, if you don't have a backup, you notice it quickly. So he's going to be a huge signing.
Yeah. And that was like an awkward position for the staff because they knew they were going to take a true freshman long snapper in the 2025 class. And then they had a guy they really, really liked in Schickel who they went out and got in the portal. So it was always going to be hard for them to convince a kid to come in probably as a senior so that they don't block a 2025 and say, hey, we want you to come be the backup here behind Schickel. So like they were really going to be in big trouble there regardless if Schickel got hurt, and then he did. So that was just kind of that in-between year where they were kind of trying to stagger it, and that's what happened there. But so great pickup there as well. These are the guys. There's 17 guys total on the board. 16 of them signed today. You're looking at Bryson Williams as what's one of the storylines to monitor as we head into February signing day. He didn't sign today. We haven't heard of any kind of specific schools or anybody that like swayed his mind. It was more so just him taking time, kind of talking through things. And then the other storyline of what's next is Antonio Johnson, who we mentioned. He's teammates with Bryson Williams. He is the offensive tackle who I said the credits kind of didn't transfer as he went from one school to another. Corey's been closely following that as the time goes on, and he would be an offensive tackle that Michigan State would love to have in the class in February. And if the credits transfer, that's something that I think would be very, very feasible here. The other things kind of beyond that of what to follow is just the transfer portal. That's going to pick up here. Not going to go too much into that today because we're going to have kind of more developments and more insight as the days go on, as the exit meetings go on, as other kids enter the portal from other schools and stuff like that. But just generally speaking, like I said, offensive line will be a huge priority, but then again, it is for everybody. And wide receiver will be a priority. Defensive end will be a priority. Defensive tackle, I think, is mostly just going to be if there's a starter-worthy guy because they have a lot of bodies beyond that. I think you're looking at 7 guys right there. So you're going to be probably hoping that one of those younger linebackers they brought in last year can kind of get into the playing group. Then you kind of got Jordan Hall, you got Brady Pretzloff, and then the guys coming in. So probably a linebacker ideally, and then corners, maybe some safeties, depending on kind of where they view some of the guys like a Dylan Tatum and where they kind of think he will play and things of that nature. But yeah, those are kind of the positions of need. Running back, like I touched on, we'll see what Carter does and what they kind of feel the need to do to complement him or to replace him, one or the other. And then, there's going to be some attrition. We don't know kind of all the names. We don't know even really most of the names. But yeah, like nothing earth shattering behind the scenes right now, as kind of people know the Nick Marsh thing is playing out as it is. And I think Michigan State right now trending in a good direction, but very fluid there as always. And there's going to be some reset, some forced attrition, the staff kind of doing things the way that they want to do and kind of maybe making room in terms of getting guys to maybe look elsewhere that they wouldn't have recruited themselves. And that first year when they get here in December, they've kind of gotten a couple days to get to know the kids. And then even by spring, you're looking at just 3-4 months of knowing the kids. You don't really know a lot of people's attitudes and stuff until you really go through adversity. That doesn't happen when you're 0-0. So few guys will probably be leaving without it being their choice. Some guys, maybe that would be their choice. And at the end of the day, you're probably looking at anywhere from like 17 to 21 new transfers being brought in. That's kind of the range that I was given. And yeah, they should be well funded for the most part. I think that's one thing that has been consistently echoed to us the last few weeks with Spartan Nation, NIL, and things of that nature. So they should be good to kind of turn this around and turn the roster over and keep this going and have the upward trajectory next year. But again, that'll all be seen, and we'll be covering that over on the Shaw Lane VIP board. Definitely go ahead and subscribe if you haven't. We're going to be breaking down the cornerback coach vacancy. Definitely check out my hot board if you haven't. More signing day articles coming tonight. We'll have superlatives out of like most likely to be a pro, most underrated, things of that nature. Conversation and dialogue is always going on the Shaw Lane board. We're going to be covering the portal, all the intricacies, all of that. Corey, any closing thoughts and final words?
No, just thanks for everyone that's following us, subscribers with us. We appreciate you guys. We like days like today when you're all happy and celebrating, as opposed to some of the other stuff. But it goes with the job and the territory of it. So I mean, just hang in there. It's gonna be a wild ride. You're gonna see some names in the portal you don't like, some you like, and you'll see a lot of them come in too. So just what it is, and enjoy the ride until and put some hope in your winner for the football team.
Yeah, definitely. And appreciate your time, Corey. Always good talking recruiting with you as we do on a daily basis outside of the podcast setting, but also definitely to do it on the podcast as well. So thank you for your time. Thanks everyone that was listening. And yeah, definitely thanks everyone that continues to read. Thank you to everyone that is a subscriber. It hasn't been the most active recruiting season, as you guys know, and probably from July until the last couple of weeks. But I hope you know that we try to do all we can to cover it, but we can't make news. And today we had some news, and it was great to talk about it. It was great to report on it, and see everyone out there on social media, on the Shaw Lane VIP board predominantly. And thanks everyone for listening.